Night settles over Easter Island, and the familiar silence stretches across the ancient land. The Moai statues stand tall as they always have, stern, expressionless, guarding secrets no one has fully understood. But beneath the ground they rest on, beneath the soil and stone and volcanic ash, something long hidden has finally been disturbed. It began as a routine survey, a quiet research team, a set of ground-penetrating radar tools, and the same unanswered questions that have surrounded Easter Island for centuries. But on this night, the radar returned something no one expected. A perfect geometric void, far too deep, far too precise, and unlike anything ever documented beneath the island. At first, the team assumed it was a natural cave. Easter Island has a volcanic past after all. Lava tubes run beneath parts of the land. But this was different. This was intentional, designed. A chamber created by hands long before the Rapa Nui culture existed. When the team lowered the first probe camera into the darkness, everything changed. Dust drifted across the lens like tiny ghosts. The air inside the chamber had been sealed for thousands of years. And then, the camera captured something that froze every scientist in the room. A structure, a platform. And on that platform, an object carved from a stone not native to Easter Island. Symbols engraved with a precision that should not have been possible for the island's early inhabitants. Symbols that matched nothing in any Polynesian language. But the greatest shock of all was that some of these symbols were unmistakably similar to carvings found in ancient Mesoamerica, across an ocean thousands of miles away. This discovery immediately forced a simple question. How did something from one of the most isolated islands on the planet carry markings connected to a civilization that existed on the other side of the world? And more importantly, what else lay inside that chamber? When the team finally widened the opening and descended into the pitch-black space, they realized the chamber was much larger than expected. The walls were smooth, polished, as if shaped by a tool more advanced than anything known on the island. Strange pigments stained the stone, reds and oranges used in rituals not found in Rapa Nui culture. Then came the star map. Carved into the main wall of the chamber was a sprawling celestial diagram. Constellations, alignments, a sky that did not match our present world. One researcher cross-referenced the star positions and realized the horrifying truth. The map reflected the night sky, as it appeared over 11,000 years ago. Thousands of years before the first people ever reached Easter Island. Thousands of years before the Moai. Before Polynesian expansion. Before agriculture. Before the rise of nearly every known civilization on Earth. This was not just an ancient artifact. It was evidence of a forgotten world. As the team explored deeper into the chamber, they uncovered a series of carvings depicting long voyages, canoe-like vessels cutting across vast oceans drawn in a style that seemed older than anything Polynesian. The carvings suggested a people who traveled far beyond what historians believe early humans were capable of. And then there was the basalt block. Placed directly at the center of the chamber was a large carved stone, an object with markings almost identical to Olmec glyphs found in Mexico. The Olmecs, one of the earliest known civilizations in the Americas, had no recorded contact with Pacific Islanders. They lived thousands of miles away, separated by endless ocean. Yet here, beneath the soil of Easter Island, lay a stone that carried their unmistakable signature. As word of the discovery spread, specialists around the world argued over its implications. Some claimed it proved ancient trans-oceanic contact between cultures long before mainstream history allows. Others insisted the chamber must be even older, perhaps built by a civilization predating the Olmecs entirely, a civilization forgotten, erased by time, leaving only scattered clues across the planet. The presence of the star map added another layer of mystery. Why would people carve a sky from 11,000 years ago? What event were they marking? A migration? A disaster? A warning? Some researchers noticed something chilling. The star alignment carved into the wall matches the sky on the night of a major climatic event, the sudden end of the last ice age, a time of global flooding and catastrophic changes that reshaped the Earth. Was this chamber a record of that event? A message left behind by a people who survived a planetary catastrophe? As archaeologists dug further into the floor, they unearthed fragments of tools made from obsidian, bone and coral, none belonging to any known Rapa Nui period. The deeper they dug, the further the layers of history stretched backward, as if the chamber had been maintained over many generations and modified across different unknown eras. Layer by layer, the site revealed a timeline stretching back further than anything in the Pacific. The lowest layers appeared almost prehistoric, predating agriculture in most parts of the world. Higher layers contained more advanced stonework and more refined carvings. Near the top were crude markings closer to early Polynesian styles. The deeper they went, the older the mystery became. By the 9th day of excavation, a new challenge emerged. Near the back of the inner chamber, the team encountered collapsed stone, proof that the chamber once extended further. When the debris was removed, they uncovered yet another passageway. Except this one was different. It wasn't sealed. It was destroyed. The stone was shattered inward, not outward, as if something powerful or someone had broken into the chamber thousands of years ago. Questions raced through the team. Why break into a tomb? What were they searching for? And what happened inside this forgotten underworld? When the archaeologists followed the broken passage, they entered a vast cavern with natural walls, far rougher than the polished chamber behind them. In the center of this cavern was a pile of scattered bones, not arranged like a burial, but torn apart, shattered, burned in some places, crushed in others. Something terrible had happened here. The bones were human, but they belonged to multiple individuals, and they dated to vastly different eras. This was not a burial site. This was something else entirely. As the researchers analyzed the fragments, they noticed signs of conflict, broken tools, cracked skulls, and burned debris. Whatever happened here, it wasn't ritual. It was violent, chaotic. And yet, strangely, the older layers showed something even more disturbing. Evidence of sudden flooding. Sediment lines indicated rapid water movement through the cavern long ago, depositing marine silt almost 40 meters above sea level. This meant one thing. At some point in its ancient history, Easter Island experienced a massive, catastrophic event, one that may have wiped out earlier inhabitants or forced them into these underground refuges. The team began piecing together a chilling timeline. A prehistoric people built the first chamber. A later group expanded it. Travelers from distant regions were visited, leaving behind artifacts. A disaster struck, causing flooding and collapse. Survivors retreated underground. Conflict followed, and eventually, the entire site was sealed. Until now. But the greatest revelation had not yet surfaced. The deepest secret of the chamber remained buried, waiting to be uncovered in the next section of this unfolding mystery. The deeper the excavation went, the stranger the discoveries became. After days of clearing debris, the team finally reached the lowest accessible layer of the chamber complex. What they found here was unlike anything seen on Easter Island before. Embedded into the rock floor was a massive circular carving, nearly 3 meters wide. It featured a pattern of spirals, lines, and shapes that matched no known Polynesian motif. Instead, the design closely resembled ancient petroglyph styles found in parts of South America and even in prehistoric Australia. The carving wasn't decorative, it was deliberate, mathematical, mapped with such precision that one researcher described it as a message left by a civilization that understood both the stars and the Earth. Around the circumference of the circle were small depressions, each positioned with geometric accuracy. When aligned with the symbols on the stone tablet found earlier, the pattern revealed something extraordinary. It formed a calendar, but not a lunar calendar, not a solar calendar, not even a Polynesian navigational chart. This calendar tracked long cycles of the Earth, cycles stretching tens of thousands of years. Cycles associated with climate shifts, magnetic reversals, global catastrophes, and astronomical alignments far beyond anything ancient seafaring cultures were believed capable of understanding. And yet, here it was, carved into the floor of a chamber far beneath Easter Island. As researchers traced the symbols across the stone, they began to understand the implications. Whoever created this chamber was mapping the world long before modern history began. They were tracking the sky, the seasons, the movements of the Earth itself. One archaeologist suggested a theory that sent chills down the room. This chamber may have been a survival vault, a repository of knowledge made during a time when the world was changing dramatically. And the evidence supported it. The star map carved into the wall above matched the sky at the end of the last ice age. The sediments showed signs of massive flooding. The burial belonged to a traveler from a distant land. The broken passage suggested a struggle for survival. Slowly, a picture began to form. A picture far older than any known Polynesian, South American, or even early human culture. But the discoveries were far from finished. Behind the circular carving, the team found a series of faint markings on the wall, so faded they were almost invisible. Using infrared imaging, the researchers enhanced the lines and revealed a mural unlike anything found in the Pacific. The mural depicted a coastline, huge waves, human figures fleeing inland, mountains splitting, a sky filled with streaks of fire. It was a disaster narrative, a memory of an ancient cataclysm. But what made it truly shocking was what came next. The mural continued, showing boats pushed into open water, traveling far from the collapsing land and reaching a new shore. Below the final scene were symbols identical to those found in the burial chamber. The same elongated skull figure, shown as a leader or guide. This was not just a random artwork. It was a story, a migration, a desperate journey across oceans. It suggested that Easter Island was not settled by accident. It was chosen intentionally by survivors of a world-changing event. The researchers realized something even more astonishing. Parts of this mural resembled flood myths from dozens of cultures around the world, from the Andean stories of Viracocha, to the Polynesian tales of a great deluge, to the Aboriginal legends of rising seas, even to the Sumerian and biblical flood narratives. Could all these ancient stories originate from the same event? Could Easter Island's buried chamber be one of the last surviving records of that forgotten catastrophe? As the team debated the implications, another discovery shifted the investigation even further. One of the researchers noticed faint metal fragments embedded in the wall, something never found in any traditional Rapa Nui context. The fragments were tiny, almost microscopic, but their composition was startling. An alloy containing elements rarely found together naturally. They were remnants of tools or technology that belonged to a people far more advanced than expected. This raised a question so controversial that many were scared to say it aloud. What if this chamber wasn't built by the Rapa Nui, but by a civilization that existed long before them? If true, it would mean that Easter Island had been inhabited, or at least visited, during a time when mainstream archaeology insists the Pacific was empty. Even more disturbingly, the presence of the Olmec-style carvings and the elongated skull burial suggested that this ancient culture was connected to distant civilizations across the world, long before any known trans-oceanic contact. With every new discovery, the timeline stretched further back. 5,000 years, 7,000, 10,000, perhaps even more. The idea that ancient people crossed oceans has always been resisted by mainstream historians, but the chamber beneath Easter Island now provided physical evidence, perhaps the strongest ever found, that ancient global contact did occur. The more the researchers uncovered, the more it became clear they were standing inside a structure built not by a simple island culture, but by a civilization with knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and oceanic travel far beyond their time. And yet, the deepest revelation was still ahead. One final chamber remained sealed. One final secret lay waiting. One final discovery would push this mystery beyond archaeology and into the realm of the unthinkable. As the team prepared to open the final sealed chamber, a sense of unease filled the underground space. Every discovery so far had pushed the limits of archaeology, rewritten timelines, and challenged the deepest assumptions about human history. But this last door felt different. Older, heavier, almost deliberate in its warning. The inscriptions above it were clearer than any found before. They showed a figure with an elongated skull, standing before a massive wave, arms raised as though calling people to safety. Beneath the carving was a symbol repeated 3 times. The same symbol found on the star chart, the murals, and the central basalt block. Whatever was behind this door, the builders wanted to ensure only those who understood the message would enter. When the seal finally gave way, the chamber beyond was unlike anything in the complex. It was not a tomb or a vault or a ceremonial hall. It was a library. A library of stone. The walls were lined with slabs, tablets arranged in deliberate order. Each tablet contained carvings, star patterns, ocean routes, maps of coastlines long vanished beneath rising seas. Some showed the Earth with different shorelines, suggesting these records were created during an era of dramatic climate shifts. One tablet stood out immediately. It depicted the Pacific Ocean at a time when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. Islands that are now submerged appeared clearly etched. Pathways between them were marked, routes of travel, currents, winds. Evidence of a maritime network that predates all known maps by thousands of years. Another tablet showed something even more astonishing. A chain of events illustrated in symbolic form. A celestial object approaching Earth, fragments breaking away, fire raining from the sky, floods rising, coastlines sinking. A memory preserved in stone. A memory echoed in myths from nearly every ancient culture on the planet. Then one of the researchers voiced a thought the others were silently avoiding. What if this chamber was built by survivors of a global disaster? The evidence pointed to a civilization that endured something catastrophic, something so monumental that survivors felt compelled to encode their knowledge beneath the Earth. Knowledge they hoped future generations would discover when the world was safe again. As the team documented the tablets, they noticed something disturbing. The carvings became simpler and more primitive the closer they got to the exit of the chamber. The oldest tablets, the deepest ones, were the most advanced. The ones nearest the entrance were crude, rushed, almost desperate. It told a tragic story. A civilization with advanced knowledge slowly lost its skills over generations until all that remained were fading memories, stories, myths, and rituals. A culture collapsing not because of external forces, but because time eroded everything they once knew. This realization led to an even more chilling conclusion. The earliest levels of the chamber were created by a people far older than previously imagined. Long before the Rapa Nui, long before the Polynesian voyagers, long before the Olmecs, perhaps long before the end of the last ice age, a forgotten civilization erased by catastrophe, leaving behind only fragments buried beneath one of the most remote islands on Earth. But there was still one final discovery inside the chamber, one that would ignite controversy worldwide. Near the back wall sat a stone pedestal. On it rested a single artifact, perfectly preserved. A small spherical object carved from volcanic glass, impossibly smooth, with lines encircling it like latitudes and longitudes on a globe. Except this globe showed coastlines that no longer exist. Continents shaped differently. Land stretching across the Pacific, where there is now only water. It was a map of the world as it looked before the seas rose. For a moment, the entire team fell into silence. This was impossible. It shouldn't exist. And yet, there it was, undeniable, a message from a world long gone. If this artifact was real, it meant that ancient people not only traveled across oceans, they mapped them. They measured them. They understood the world in ways modern scholars refuse to consider. The implications were staggering. Ancient people were far more connected than we thought. Civilizations rose, spread, communicated, and collapsed long before recorded history. Knowledge was lost, destroyed or intentionally hidden. Easter Island, remote, isolated, mysterious, was one of the last surviving keys to a forgotten age. As the team surfaced from the chamber for the final time, carrying with them the weight of a discovery that would shake the foundations of archaeology, one truth became impossible to ignore. History is not what we have been told. Human civilization is not young. It is ancient, far older, far more advanced, and far more mysterious than our modern textbooks allow. The MOI now seemed different. Not just statues, not just monuments, but guardians, placed as markers for the future. Protectors standing watch over a hidden legacy meant to be uncovered when humanity was ready. And now, standing beneath the silent gaze of these stone giants, the world must confront a startling possibility. We are not the first advanced civilization. We are only the latest. The chamber beneath Easter Island had remained silent for thousands of years. But its message, carved in stone, preserved in darkness, has finally returned to the surface. And it leaves a question echoing across the Pacific. What else lies buried beneath our feet, waiting for us to rediscover the truth of who we really are? Beneath the mural's faded pigments, a sequence of panels told an epic story of destruction and escape. Figures clambered up fractured terraces as water consumed cultivated plains. Ash streaked the sky, and familiar landmarks vanished beneath surging currents. Small craft were tossed like toys, their crews clinging to carved timbers and woven sails, while fires rained down from a sky rendered in streaks of ochre and black. One recurring protagonist appeared across multiple scenes. A leader with a long banded head, arms raised in command, directing columns of people toward high ground and into sturdy vessels. This individual was depicted with tools and diagrams, pointing to mapped lines and compass-like motifs, implying an intentional transmission of knowledge rather than mere myth-making. Adjacent panels shifted to close-ups of material culture. Artisans sketched thin sheets, interlocking joints, and tapered pins with the care of engineers. Representations of worked metal gleamed in pictograph ink, annotated with dots and measured lines. When conservators sampled the plaster adjacent to these drawings, they found metallic detritus fused into the surface, microscopic slivers and beads that did not match regional ores. Chemical analysis returned a puzzling signature: alloy mixes containing cobalt traces, unusual vanadium concentrations, and minor amounts of elements typically associated with later metallurgical traditions. Associated glassy inclusions suggested high-temperature processing and controlled cooling methods. Moreover, the painted renderings emphasized polished edges and tight tolerances, features consistent with powered abrasion or repeatable shaping techniques. Pigments used to highlight mechanical parts included a vivid blue sourced to a deposit absent from local geology, indicating procurement networks or specialized trade. Combined, the imagery and residue argued for a population capable of advanced fabrication, cataloging both failures and successful design iterations within communal memory. Taken together, the mural behaved like more than storytelling. It functioned as a portable workshop rendered in pigment, a record of catastrophe, an inventory of salvage technologies, and a primer for reconstruction. For the team, the evidence complicated simple narratives of primitive islander existence and raised urgent questions about lost knowledge dispersed across distant shores. If confirmed, these materials and diagrams would force scholars to reconsider distribution of technology across oceans and eras. When the seal finally gave way, the chamber beyond was unlike anything in the complex. It was not a tomb or a vault or a ceremonial hall. It was a library of stone, The walls were lined with slabs, tablets, arranged in deliberate order. Each tablet contained carvings, star patterns, ocean routes, maps of coastlines long vanished beneath rising seas. Some showed the Earth with different shorelines, suggesting these records were created during an era of dramatic climate shifts. One tablet stood out immediately. It depicted the Pacific Ocean at a time when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. Islands that are now submerged appeared clearly etched. Pathways between them were marked, routes of travel, currents, winds, evidence of a maritime network that predates all known maps by thousands of years. Another tablet showed something even more astonishing. A chain of events illustrated in symbolic form. A celestial object approaching Earth, fragments breaking away, fire raining from the sky, floods rising, coastlines sinking. A memory preserved in stone, a memory echoed in myths from nearly every ancient culture on the planet. It was then that one of the researchers voiced a thought the others were silently avoiding. One researcher asked, what if this chamber was built by survivors of a global disaster? The evidence pointed to a civilization that endured something catastrophic, something so monumental that survivors felt compelled to encode their knowledge beneath the earth. Knowledge they hoped future generations would discover when the world was safe again. As the team documented the tablets, they noticed something disturbing. The carvings became simpler and more primitive the closer they got to the exit of the chamber. The oldest tablets, the deepest ones, were the most advanced. The ones nearest the entrance were crude, rushed, almost desperate. It told a tragic story. A civilization with advanced knowledge slowly lost its skills over generations until all that remained were fading memories, stories, myths, and rituals. A culture collapsing not because of external forces, but because time eroded everything they once knew. This realization led to an even more chilling conclusion. The earliest levels of the chamber were created by a people far older than previously imagined. Long before the Rapa Nui, long before the Polynesian voyagers, long before the Olmecs, perhaps long before the end of the last ice age.